Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special Unfiltered podcast production. We have a special guest with us besides Cindy Krafft, who's the most special, right, to everyone here. We have
Okay.
Mary Carr, who is the Vice President of Regulatory Affairs for the Alliance, which is the combination of NOC, and I'm not even going to butcher the other name, but it's the new entity who has a new president. And we're so happy to have Mary on our Unfiltered. And I already warned her that we're going to try and uh, poke the bear a bit and try and get her personal opinion and allow her to get some of her frustrations out, because that's what our Unfiltered podcast is about. We've been trying to schedule this one for a while, so I can't tell you how excited I am. If you can tell by the tenor and the speed of my voice, you can tell how excited I am. And we have a special thing to talk about today. We have a new COP that's coming January 1st, 2025. And Cindy, do you want to do an introduction to that before we get started with Mary?
Well, I think every time we get a proposed rule and then ultimately a final rule, the first thing everybody wants to talk about is how much money are we losing? That's the first one. How big of a hit is it going to be? And then that tends to follow, then is there anything going on with quality reporting? Are they going to give us new Oasis items down the road or anything like that? And sometimes the stuff below that kind of falls off the radar. If there was an RFI, well, maybe they'll talk about that eventually, other things, and we're very busy and the rule is very long. But this time, there's a COP change. And I think it's a pretty significant one, Mary. And I'm getting mixed reaction from agencies in terms of some are like, nah, it's not big of a deal. I think there's something already in place for that, or completely unaware that this has occurred. So when I was thinking about doing an unfiltered and talking about that COP, you came top of mind to say, can you help us understand this and give us some ideas what agencies should be thinking about in terms of getting themselves compliant for January 1?
Mhm. Sure. Well, let's just go back and talk about why the COP came about. And it came about because CMS was hearing that patients were having, particularly beneficiaries, were having a very difficult time having access into home care, and it was getting rising and rising. This is not new. We've been hearing about it. Referral rejections have been increasing over the years, and it's related mainly to capacity. The costs are going up, reimbursements going down. I don't know if we're ever going to see staffing levels like we did pre-pandemic, and they weren't even that great to begin with. So we are in this, it's fearful. It really is a threatening time in terms of being able to forward or increase your business. But in addition to not having access, they were also hearing that patients are accepting agencies are accepting patients on the care for which they cannot complete the plan of care. They may believe they can complete the plan of care when they admit them. Somewhere down the road, they lose staff or they realize they can't do this because they can't meet the needs as intended. So they either contact the practitioner and have the plan of care modified, or they have to transfer the patient. Now, one of my concerns or questions to CMS when I saw this proposal in the final, particularly in the preamble, they really didn't get into the scope of the problem. They didn't, it was kind of out of context. It just said, we are hearing this, we are hearing that. We don't know if this is something that was in rural areas or this in urban areas, or there's certain cases, types of patients that are having difficulty. So it was difficult to even respond to this. But we certainly took the position, and that was with the support of our members, that this is really a capacity issue, and that agencies, but for the most part, agencies are not sitting out there just cherry picking to increase profits. They are truly looking at these entities, these criteria that CMS has said you now have to have as part of your policy. Whether it was officially written in policy or not, most agencies tell me this is what we look at. We get a referral, we look at our staffing, we look at our skill levels, we look at the case mix. We really have to make a financial decision that you can't exercise that out. This is a business. You wouldn't expect a restaurant to, operate, take everybody they want, whether they can pay or not. I mean, this is a business. So that was our position, that agencies, we always we always have CMS has a very cynical view of things, and we're all bad. If one's bad, we're all bad. So we wanted to try to impress upon CMS that, in fact, this may be some actors out there doing this, but for the most part, agencies are doing this, whether it is officially part of their policy or not. And we spoke to all of the AOs when we were developing our comments, and the AOs were saying the same thing that Cindy had talked about earlier. Not that she said it in this podcast, but in our discussion prior, that some agencies, their clients don't see this as going to be a big lift at all because they're already doing it. I think the question is, again, and it's a cynical view, is CMS going to turn this somehow against us? That cherry picking. And I think that's what they are very concerned about, that agencies are cherry picking. Now, there is a difference between cherry picking, in my mind, and having to be selective for financial solvency. Mm-hmm. And that's where that fine line hits, and that kind of splitting hair, that if you can demonstrate that in fact you were turning down referrals because you don't have the skills, the staff, it is financially going to bankrupt you, then I think you're going to be okay. If you are not looking at this element on each referral and you're using IA or some kind of software that just says take these patients because this is how you're going to maximize your profits. And we still have to accept the fact that MedPAC's data and even NAC's data that we ran on cost reports for 2020, I think it was 2022 or 2023 data. For MedPAC, it's 2023 data, where we're still seeing like 20+% profit margins. Even when they put in the other payers for the first time MedPAC did that, it was still 17%. Wow. We get the same. The problem is you're looking at averages, and averages don't tell the story. There are some agencies that are drowning. There is no doubt about it, particularly these small ones. So they put in these averages and everybody says, well, financially, you're healthy and you should not be so selective. You should be able to be providing services to these patients. Mm-hmm. So that's that in a nutshell.
Well, but isn't it true that prior to this, and before I go there though, what I found frustrating in the proposed rule is they put the COP thing there and then they put an RFI to learn about staffing. It's like, wait a second, why don't you investigate the staffing situation a little bit more before you put this on it? But well, it happened. But prior to this, if I owned a home health agency and let's say, don't have therapy, I can still operate that way. If I have nursing and one therapeutic service, I meet the criteria, I am a home health agency. But my obligation is to disclose I do not have occupational therapy to any referral sources. And if I got a patient and it turned out they needed OT, then my obligation is to offer to transfer them somewhere else. Now, I've heard for years from some providers, they say, well, nobody around here has OT, so I don't have to offer them a transfer because there's nowhere else to go. I've always felt, okay, wait, that might be the context case, but as an agency, I believe you're still obligated to tell them what the situation really is. So am I understanding that? I mean, this seems like disclosing what you don't have or can't provide is not a new idea.
It's not a new idea. Just like using this criteria when you make a decision to accept a patient isn't a new idea. But apparently it's inconsistent, obviously, across agencies. And in terms of what you offer and what you don't offer, that's the other half of this COP, is that you have to publicly notify either through website or some other public notification of what you do offer and what your limitations are, that if you clearly don't offer something. And that's where I'm looking for the interpretive guidelines, because if you never offer home health aid, or if you only offer home health aids when you have enough home health aids, how is that going to be communicated on a website, only updated when things change and annually? Now, that could change weekly. So are you going to have to update your website every week? There are some agencies that categorically, like you said, just we don't have OTs, we don't offer OT. Absolutely, I think that should be very clear to the referral sources, because another piece of this was that CMS was hearing that referral sources were having a hard time finding agencies that can meet patients' needs. They're calling agency after agency. It's like, no, we can't do this, no, we can't do that. They feel if it was very clear on the website or some other publicly reported source, that would help save them time and also make it easier for them to find an appropriate home health agency.
Well,
Hard to argue.
Well, but the interpretive guidelines is an interesting piece because I
Mhm.
think that's where we are right now is, okay, it's final, here's the wording. But another shoe could drop
Yeah,
with respect to the interpretive guidelines. And we've seen that happen before when they updated the COPs to level the playing field about who could be involved with medication issues. And then the interpretive guidelines stretched it to add nursing had to always be involved. That turned into a multi-year try to get that fixed in the interpretive
Mhm.
guidelines, although the language didn't have that in the actual COP.
Mhm.
Is there any time frame on getting this interpretive guideline
I don't know. They
element?
just keep saying soon, and that soon, too soon, they have a calendar that has soon apparently.
Oh,
I don't.
but to clarify for our listeners, the presence of an interpretive guideline for this does not change the fact that it goes into effect January 1, 2025.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's effective
Okay.
January 1, 2025.
So agencies may be saying, well, I'll just wait till the interpretive guideline.
Guidelines, they
to do
might be,
it.
but
If you cross January 1,
right. And
trouble,
we've
'cause
seen
you
this
don't have,
before. We saw this with the home revision of it back in
yeah,
2018. They
that
didn't have
took
interpretive
forever.
guidelines till like months after the effective date.
Right.
So,
Uh,
but it is going to be interesting how this is surveyed for and applied. And is this something that, agencies really aren't going to have a problem with, or is it going to cause problems for agencies? We just don't know.
I think the implementation and the interpretive guideline part of it is definitely missing, and agencies
Hmm.
feeling that they're like, do I have to change my website every other day? If I
Hmm.
have a PRN therapist show up, can I add that? How long do they have to be with me before I can add that service? Is something
Right.
fine. But I think that I want to unpack a little bit. Having been a former agency owner of a small agency in Central Florida, which was highly regulated, to the point those of you that aren't in Florida don't understand. We have state regulations that tell the federal regulations hold my beer. I mean, it's tough
Hmm.
in Florida because of the history. We One of the things that we're seeing on K&K side as a company that is a champion of the small agency, we do not feel that small agencies should be put on another shelf. A Part A home health provider is a Part A home health provider, regardless of what your size is. You have the same
Hmm.
challenges. It's about whether or not you have the scale to be able to address those challenges. And that's the big rub that we see with some of these data-driven tools that
Hmm.
are allowing agencies to pre-scrub prior to admitting, just with a history of physical or a face-to-face. They're putting it into an algorithm of some sort, and it's punching out a ticket. And the ticket says red, yellow, or green, right? Green is you're going to make some money, take this patient. Yellow is what are your resources? Can you make this happen and still make a profit? Red is go away, go to another agency. And typically they go to the smaller agencies when that
Hmm.
occurs. And I say that because smaller agencies don't have the marketing budget. They don't have the ability to run around and be in the hip pocket of every discharge planner in town. And typically they don't have the resources, the large agencies.
Hmm.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword. They're getting the most unprofitable patients, which are typically the sickest. I'm generalizing that because everybody agrees with me that those are the sicker patients that have multiple needs, and they're less resources to address those things. So do you see any correlation of the consolidation of the home health number of agencies, and the rise in non-taken under care, the intucks, and not being able to find a place to land for these patients?
Um, it's hard for me to know because I'm sitting up here. I'm not down in the field that much, but you bring up a very good point about the AI, and that's how you make your decision. I would think this COP would help to address that. That's where it has some value. Absolutely. Where you have agencies that are not taking into consideration these things, and it really is they're cherry picking. They are guided by what's going to, help the bottom line better to maximize profits. In terms of consolidation, I don't know if that I don't know if that's going to make a difference specific to this COP. It's the same. It's going to have the same issues, problems, advantages that it would for any COP. Quite frankly, I would think.
So within the COP, Mary, it isn't just listing your services in
Mhm.
terms of disciplines, because
Right,
if that was
right.
it, Care Compare would take care
Care
of it,
compare,
correct?
right,
I mean,
right.
because that's updated regularly, it has what you provide, but
Mhm,
only in terms of the name of the discipline.
mhm,
Sherry and I were talking before this, and I think she touched on an interesting point because it talks about skill set of your clinician. So it isn't just I have nursing.
mhm,
What if the patient needs psychiatric nursing or wound care? On the therapy side, which is an even touchier subject, is maintenance therapy. So K&K has been yelling from the hilltops about maintenance therapy for more than a decade. And we still encounter agencies that will say, you know what, that sounds interesting. We're not going to do that. We don't want to go there. We're worried about denials. And again, much like we said earlier, you can make that decision as an agency.
mhm.
But doesn't the COP amp up? You can't just ignore part of this benefit. If you don't provide a service, wound care, you don't provide maintenance therapy, is that what needs to be disclosed at this point now? I mean, you're making your choice, but
Mhm.
I think a lot of people have hidden the fact that they don't provide maintenance and they don't tell the patient about it or offer them another provider or anything else. Does that get somehow caught in this as well?
I do believe that's their intent because they talk about limitations in duration, frequency, and services very specifically. What are
Mhm.
your limitations in this? I never do home care. I mean, home health aides. I don't do behavior health. I don't do, So, and one of the questions that was somebody asked me was, can we just put on what we do? And it's like, well, there's nothing that says that's not sufficient. We just don't know.
Right.
I mean, so instead of listing all the things we don't do, and so it's kind of like never thought about it that way. But so it is something that again, we're hoping the interpretive guidelines help. And a lot of times we really won't know what the expectation is until people get surveyed against it.
Well, and then we know
That's
what can happen
unfortunate.
there is
Yeah.
agency A can get one
One
story,
survey and right,
agency B
exactly,
gets another one.
exactly.
And those are the
So
situations, Mary, though, where you want them to direct that communication back to you, correct?
yes,
As
yes.
far as on a national level, if I,
Level, yeah. What are we seeing and what are the problems?
right,
Yeah, what are the
you,
expectations? Yes.
you have always had, in my interaction with you, an open door policy to the provider of
Sure.
if you're doing some wackadoodle thing or somebody showed up and is doing this,
Yeah.
please
No,
let you
absolutely.
know, because is it a one-off? Is it a state
Uh-huh.
issue? Is it, I mean, are you noticing? And then you can take that stuff to CMS and say,
Mhm.
listen, we're seeing this. I think a lot of times people are afraid of their surveyor and are like, I will just do whatever they tell me. I remember in my infancy in the home health industry, I was pulled in on a state survey, and what she was saying, I was reading it right in front of me, and that was not what it said. And she just kept harping on it. And the administrator took me out and said, you need to just keep your mouth shut so she'll go away. I said, but she's making us change things. This is not what it says. And I got the whole just let it go.
Mhm.
And I'm
Mhm.
thinking, but how many times do we do that? And then things get out of control. We don't
Control.
know
Okay.
that that's happening in other agencies, or maybe my state just got a bunch of surveyors in a mood.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's always vindictive. I think sometimes it's a misunderstanding.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
agencies think they heard something at a conference once and then tell everybody and it becomes a
Right. Right.
rule. I think sometimes a surveyor unchecked thinks they're doing this the right way, or maybe doesn't have the best guidance in the interpretive guidelines and can start going off in directions that you would want to know to say, hey,
Mhm.
CMS, we appreciate it, but please stay in your guardrails as
Yeah.
well, because this is getting out of control. So if I was running an agency right now and I'm like, okay, Mary, I know I got January 1, keep an eye out for the interpretive guidelines. I know Care Compare has the general. What would you suggest? You have a couple suggestions of what I should think about? Because we know that there are some people, they're going to get very caught in the weeds and try to write some very complicated policies
Mhm.
related to this that maybe then they're going to get surveyed against and have a big mess. What would you want them to focus on?
I would want them to focus on what they do offer. I would want them to focus on if there is something they do not offer and they're getting a lot of requests for, I would absolutely include that. I mean, if you're right next to a psychiatric hospital or something and you get referrals almost daily for behavior health and you don't offer it, because the intent of this is to help guide the referral source. It always helps if you keep the intent behind the regulation when you're trying to comply with it. And that's what the intent is. So and again, how far you have to go down that road as far as what you don't offer, if you, but like you said, if you know that there's something the benefit offers and you do not provide that, you have no intention of providing that, I would expect you to have that somewhere very clearly stated.
And
So
I would
could this
also mention that you, on your taking into care, the agreement that the patient signs would not be a bad idea to have a line that says, we offered the patient these services and that the patient signed off on receiving those services, or the ones that they're not going to get, so that the patient clearly understands that they're not going to receive occupational therapy if they stay with your agency. I think that as long as the patient is informed,
Form, uh-huh.
then it's going to be okay. And I want to put a disclaimer here as we start to go towards the end. We love data at K&K. We don't have a problem with folks using data-driven devices and programs to find out more about those patients and resource for those patients. The issue we have is that if profit is driving your decision-making in that, number one, you're heading towards a problem.
Mm-hmm.
CMS, as they become more savvy in the data, they're going to be able to tell via the data who is using these types of tools. And then they may focus and edit on something they see in that data. So tread carefully if you're using it and make sure you're using it for the right way. But Mary, I want to hand you a magic wand. And I want to say, with your experience and you being one of my touchstones in this industry, and thank you so much for being that, if I gave you a magic wand, what would you do as a policy or as an edit to the COPs to help with the problems that you're seeing as far as access to care?
Oh boy, I think if I had a magic wand, it would not be done by AI solely. I really do. It has to be, and like I said, at CMS this is their those kinds of things, that kind of technology. They're not only hearing that they're having difficulty getting in, but now I think they're starting to understand, they may actually understand why a little more too. And if I had a magic wand, of course, every agency would be perfect and always in compliance, and we wouldn't have these people sinking the ships for us. But yeah, I would absolutely have some way that the AI is used appropriately and not to cherry pick.
Well, I just to tack to that though, I think part of your magic wand was they should have done the RFI first.
They should have done the R. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. They should have done
That's
the
the RFI. I mean,
and that was in my comments. Absolutely, my comments. Get stakeholder input before you do this.
Yeah, can we talk about what some of the concerns are before we just say put it on your
Exactly,
website
and try to get a better, because it's always very cynical. It's always a very cynical view from CMS. They're all out there. They're bad. They're cheating the federal government. Yada yada yada. Is all they care about is profits, and some do and some don't. And they don't even know the scope of that. I mean, it may be true, but nobody really knows the scope of it. No one's ever looked to see the scope of it.
But it does also sound like this policy stuff that people have to come up with, their intake could be a very valuable part of this.
That's what it would be.
Referral. So when you said that, I want to circle back to it because I think, very often agencies get into what do I need to put in a policy to check the boxes? I think your comment of think about it from the referral source side, which is what this is really meant to do. So if I'm a potential referral to your agency, how are we expediting? I know where I can send them. I don't want to call 5 different people and find out what they have and what they don't have. I think it could be seen as a positive to boost referrals, that if you're out there with, it's right on our website, or we let all our referral sources know, go to this part of our website, you'll know in real time where we are, what we have, what we don't have. That could actually be a strategic advantage.
That could be absolutely
on the referral, because it's like, I can just look at your site, or I got to call those 3. I'm not.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So I think that's a piece that you brought out today I hadn't really thought about, but if we think about it from the referral source and the beneficiary, and not, it's one more thing, it's just
I have to do. Yeah.
Right. It's busy work as long as I put something together. You could spin that into a way. Well, then again, if it's like, shh, I'm already short-staffed, I don't want it anymore. It could be something else. But I think that helps to frame what the policy and procedure stuff should be. That it's not really a bunch of what I have to do. It's what I'm doing, so that a referral source or beneficiary can look easily and say, okay, that fits what I need right now, and reach out for the referral.
Right. Yeah, and in terms of asking for the RFI at the same time that they propose and finalize the solution, tells me that there is pressure. There's probably pressure CMS is receiving from these. We're guessing beneficiary advocacy groups, and probably a lot of pressure that they felt they needed to finalize something. They needed to do something to try to address this problem, even if they were completely off the mark.
Well, Sherry, if we had more time, because she teed it up, all we'd have to mention now is what happened to the therapy RFI?
You know,
Thank
Cindy,
you.
I had the exact
Yeah,
same.
I know.
So
I don't know.
I'm going to end us on this topic because I'm going to try and talk Mary into coming back to discuss the vanishing, ghosting RFI for therapies.
We did podcasts, Mary. We beat our newsletter. We told people, say something now. And I got emails the minute that thing dropped saying, I've read it. What happened?
Yeah,
I can't find it. I'm like,
I can only think that it probably was very positive, very much supporting the comments supported. And they probably just want to tell people, they probably didn't want to
I mean,
summarize that.
usually they like summarize it. They could have even
I
said,
know.
hey, we got your comments, and they were generally positive.
Right, yeah, I know.
But it just
I don't know. I don't know.
comes with
That's
it.
a big mystery to me. And people are like, well, maybe you can find out. No, I can't find out. CMS is not going to tell me why they didn't put the RF5 comment summary in.
this has been wonderful.
We're magical, but we're not that magical.
This has been wonderful, and I can't tell you how much I anticipated being to one day get you on one of our.
Oh, golly, anytime.
We are blessed to have you here, and we love providing this kind of information for our subscribers and our listeners because some of them are in small agencies out there on an island feeling like they're at the bottom of the hill with Sisyphus's rock. They go up a little bit, they get pushed back down. They go up a little bit more, they get pushed back down. Without folks like you, Mary, out there trying to salvage this benefit because it's such an important benefit for seniors. I don't know where we'd be. So I just have to tell you thank you from the bottom of my heart. And
Oh, you're welcome.
do you have any closing thoughts before we get off of this and schedule Mary for later to talk about the therapy RFI because after we get some information on that.
No, I think I want to thank you also, Mary, for joining us today. It's important to get information into the hands of agencies in a practical way. And again, your tip about seeing it from the referral side, I think really helps to reframe it in a positive way. And we'll be on the lookout. Who knows? Maybe we can get her back for the interpretive guidelines when they drop, because who knows what will be in there. Fingers crossed. It's just,
Yeah.
No pressure, Mary, but all the pressure in the world. Thank you again for coming on with us. And those of you that like our Unfiltered podcast, hit the subscribe button because when we post it, you'll be the first one notified that it's posted and you can listen to it first. So stay tuned and thank you for what you do out there and everyone stay safe.